further debate, I recognize the member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I am very glad to be able to take my place in this legislature for the first time since the summer session. And while there is a lot to talk about, I am pleased to stand and discuss a bill that we've only had in front of us for a couple of days. So I know that the government is eagerly wondering, will we or won't we support it? But we do have questions for this government, and we're still working with the folks out in the community to have a better understanding, kind of what lies beneath, so to speak. But what we have here is Bill 131, which is the Transportation for the Future Act, and it has two sections, or two schedules. And the first one is would make changes to the City of Toronto Act, and it would allow for transit service integration between the TTC and other local transit agencies, but may affect provisions in collective agreements. So we have questions around that, and we are, working with partners in the community and want to make sure that while, we're talking about fare integration, and I think this legislature has been talking about fare integration for decades, there's an opportunity to do things well, and this government seems to never take the opportunity to do things well. They do things fast, or they do things in ways that I would be called unparliamentary if I were to identify, but not often well. So we would like to be reassured by this government that they are have the best of intentions when it comes to the unions and respecting collective agreements. But Schedule 1 of the bill reenacts, an unproclaimed Schedule 1 of Bill 2, which is the Plan to Build Act, which would allow the Toronto Transit Commissioner, TTC, to enter into service integration agreements with neighbouring transit agencies. It adds a new provision that clarifies that such service that these agreements do not constitute contracting out for the purposes of that collective agreement. When it comes to fare integration, I had a really here it is. So this is a piece not too long ago, March of 2023, and it says, "Is it finally time for transit fare integration in the GTA?" This is a piece by John Michael McGrath, but I'm just going to read this one section. He says, "Take transit fare integration. The notion of allowing transit passengers to pay a single fare when they get on a bus in, say, York Region, move on to a GO train, and then board a TTC subway. The Hansard at the Ontario Legislature says that the words, quote, fare integration were first uttered by an MPP in 1986. Though even then, it was a member saying, quote, this has been discussed on and off for the past 15 years or more. So we can say with some confidence that it's an idea that MPPs have been talking about for a half century." So just a little bit of background. And I think any one of us who meets with folks in their community, anybody who rides public transit, we have heard from them loudly and clearly that they just want to get to where they're going, that the cost can be prohibitive. We've talked to students, we've talked to workers, and we know that it doesn't matter to them what, as we've heard, what color the vehicle is. They just want to go where they need to go, or not necessarily go, but TTC where they need to TTC. And we do encourage the government, and as we've worked with TTC riders and various other groups, there is a right way to move forward with this. We have to respect collective agreements. Of course, we support transit fare and service integration, but the impact of Schedule 1 on existing collective agreements is unclear. And I'm going to hazard a guess here. I can imagine that the union would regard amendments to the City of Toronto Act and contracting out language in ATU 113's collective agreements as a pretty definite move. Is that an attack on collective bargaining rights and their charter rights, right? Is the province trying to sidestep workers as a partner in ironing out how transit service agreements can be integrated without diminishing TTC working conditions or TTC service standards? Looking forward to answers, right? and I don't do well with the government standard, just trust us. We'd like a little more to work with there, because these are issues that need to be sorted out at the bargaining table. And it's my understanding that this is a change that was sought by John Tory. That's fine. Every idea has a origin story. But the future, as you've named this bill, the future of transportation, let's do things well. Also, ATU 113 already has a provision of their collective agreement that allows the TTC to negotiate service integration agreements with other transit authorities, provided reciprocity of service standards are maintained. There was an arbiter's ruling that confirmed this union right, and there's room for discussion and pilot projects, as my colleague, where are you from? Ottawa Centre. Sorry, my colleague from behind me. Yeah, it just gave an important 1-hour speech on this, and he laid this out. You know, that there is room for the pilot projects, and I hope that the government is going to put our concerns to rest here today. I'm going to move on, though, to Schedule 2, because Schedule 2 is a particular interest to me, and I know that I'm among 7 elected MPPs that represent the Durham region, that all of us have an interest in public transit, transportation challenges across our interconnected communities. And the issue of the Bowmanville GO Extension, that is a long-standing issue. So what I would be glad to do is take us back in time a little bit. In fact, here is an article from September 25th. What's today? The 27th. So you're going to think, oh, that's a recent article, except that it's from September 25th, 2009, and it's entitled "Let's Get Going on Train Extension into Clarington." This piece by the Oshawa This Week 14 years ago says the extension comes with a $500 million to $600 million price tag, but it's a timely initiative that dovetails perfectly with increased Durham growth and the need to reduce congestion, smog, and greenhouse gas emissions caused by commuting vehicle traffic. It goes on to say that the then Premier Dalton McGuinty, we remember him, was ensuring construction starts as planned by 2011. So this is a project that has been waiting to happen for a long time, and it has not. Well, it's 2023, and we still don't have it. Another piece from June of 2016, the GO train is finally being extended to Bowmanville. This was when then Premier Wynne announces GO train extension to Bowmanville. And there's a flashy picture here that says future site of the Bowmanville GO train station, and I remember when those billboards went up, and it says the GO train is finally being extended to Bowmanville. Premier Kathleen Wynne made the announcement on Monday morning alongside Transportation Minister Stephen Del Duca, I've heard of him, Durham MPP Granville Anderson, Clarington Mayor Adrian Foster, and the then Durham Regional Chair Roger Anderson. Mayor Foster said it has been an exceptionally long journey. There are newspaper articles that go back to the early 1900s about Bowmanville being excited about a train to Toronto. Quote, "We've had public consultations on what stations might look like. We've known where the stations are going. It has been years and years and years of work." End quote. Again, that's a piece from 2016. And Speaker, I tell you that to tell you this, the folks in Durham region are looking forward to this train. And since I've been elected, and which was now 9 years ago, it has been right around the corner. And as it has evolved, and as the plans have evolved, it has taken more shape. In fact, I've got a pretty snazzy map here that shows the 4 proposed stations. So where the existing Oshawa GO station is, that won't be one of the 4, but it's going to be Thornton's Corners, the East Station, Ritson Road Station, Curtis Station, and Bowmanville Station. And those 4 stations are pretty exciting. And the people in this community eager to have this happen. And the business plan that lays out peak and off-peak and all of that, we're looking forward to this happening. So I'm not here to rain on that parade at all. But as the opposition critic, I have been eagerly chasing the details, and I will say to you that it was a fascinating meeting that I had with the Metrolinx folks just in June. So when I talked to the folks from Metrolinx in June, and I said, okay, well, I'm paraphrasing, but in the budget, there's money for the rail, okay? The government has budgeted, they're going to build the train, we're going to have rails. And then, at the meeting with Metrolinx, when I said, now tell me more about these 4 stations, they were like, everything is on the table. And if I heard that once, I heard it half a dozen times. Because at that point in June, and I understand things can change, but at that point in June, they could tell me that the 4 new stations would be delivered through transit-oriented communities programs, that they were going to be owned and operated by Metrolinx, that this station would reflect a GO station. The naming rights would be a separate program, but they were talking about investment from third parties. And so at that point, I understood from them that these stations will be integrated into the community, into the neighbourhood, making sure that folks, walking there or cycling or wanting to shop in the area, that all these things were factored in. Well, this sounds fine. This sounds good. But where would the money come from? And that was the question at the time. The station would function as a GO station, but as they had told me, everything was on the table in terms of what it could be and who was going to pay for it and all of that. So if there wasn't a developer, or if there wasn't an investor eager to invest in that location, and you know what, those 4 spots along that line, exciting and interesting spots. But if they didn't have investors, and back in June they didn't have anything committed for those 4 stations, there wasn't a magic unicorn investor who said, I'm going to pay for these. Still isn't, is my understanding. But I was worried, right, because the funding had not been secured for any of the stations. They were looking for third-party investors that said that the conversations were ongoing, and that funding is separate for the line. That in the 2022 budget, that the Metrolinx had received Stage 2 Treasury Board approval at that point. Okay. So I went from that conversation into estimates. And I see that the Minister for Infrastructure is here. She remembers estimates when we were out at the committee before the summer session at the Standing Committee on Heritage, Infrastructure and Cultural Policy. And I had the distinct pleasure of being able to grill both ministers, both for infrastructure. Well, I say grill. Some of it was grilling, some of it was conversational. But I was able to get questions on the record about the government's numbers, both to the Minister for Infrastructure and the then Minister for Transportation. And I'm going to just focus on that one section since we're talking about the stations. At estimates, I took the last 30 seconds that I had and I asked the then Minister of Transportation, and I'll just read from Hansard here. I had a conversation with Metrolinx about the Bowmanville GO Extension because there's no money for stations whatsoever on that line, and they're working with partners and hoping that they have the investment to build the stations. Will the province help us out if they can't find that magical investor to build all the stations? Will the province put in a platform and a bridge or whatever would make it safe so folks can get off the train if there's no station money? And the then Minister of Transportation assured me our transit-oriented communities program and our development program is a big part, but we will make sure that they can get on and off the train. I was relieved, Speaker, because frankly it's unusual, and so it seems a bit absurd. But governments historically, when they're paying for, sorry, I jumped ahead, when they're building public provincial infrastructure for folks, pay for it because they have a lot of revenue tools, and that's what they do, is they provide what is needed in communities. So when you have a train that has been promised, people assume stations come included, but there's a little asterisk. It's like, buy the batteries separately as well as the stations, and that was not part of the original deal. So surprise. Anyway, so what we have here is, the government has budgeted the train line. The stations come separately, assemble yourself. And you could have communities, and I don't know how it is in the Kitchener and Waterloo area, but I know you guys are excited about GO trains. So if you have a small or developing community or a place that maybe you don't have that excited investor yet, who builds the station? Well, so here we have this bill. We have this bill that is, as we've heard from the government, giving tools to municipalities basically so that they can pay for the stations, but they can recover, I hope, all of it, and that means that the stations get built faster. So my question is, how come you're not paying for it and building it? Like, seems like a pretty significant policy shift, right? You used to build provincial infrastructure, now it's like, just kidding, pay for it yourself. So plan A would be the government pays for our public infrastructure, builds it. I mean, we pay for it, but make sure that it gets built, right? They puts the money in, builds it. So I guess a plan B, where municipalities have a tool to ensure that those the stations get built, is better than not having stations. But I'm going to stick to the best solution would be if they didn't have to pay for it. We know municipalities are strapped. I know that Durham Region, I was at the annual Business Excellence Awards for the Greater Oshawa Chamber of Commerce last night, and was glad to see folks from the economic development part of the region, the regional chair, and I know that Durham is relieved that they're going to have their stations, that there's a mechanism for them to have stations. Well, me too. We want stations. We don't just want the rail to go all the way to Bowmanville and back where people wave at where they want to get off and, just jump. So, this is something that I know that the region is relieved that there is an opportunity for those stations to all happen at the same time. And for that I am glad, because I think that I know that the government has been working with Durham Region and hopefully with others who are excited about GO trains to ensure that these stations happen. But this is totally unusual. This is not how the province has historically gotten things done or built things. This is a whole new policy shift, and I'm wondering if it is a whole new policy shift and if you're actually going to own up to that you're not building infrastructure anymore. Speaker, this is, I can't believe that I'm almost out of time, although really does it surprise any of us. Okay, I will wrap it up a little bit because this bill is called the Transportation for the Future Act. And I think as many members are in this room, there would be that many thoughts and ideas about what transportation could look like in the future, what it might look like in the future, how we plan for that, how we're excited about that, how we're fearful of that, all of those things. But one of the things that I would highlight is that today, Phil Verster, the CEO of Metrolinx, dropped a bomb on us again that, the folks, there is no deadline for the Eglinton Crosstown. There's no deadline for completion of the Eglinton Crosstown, and folks in that community are so fed up. It's over 3 years late, over $1 billion over budget. And Metrolinx, anybody I've talked to in like the engineering world or construction world, they're so fed up with dealing with some of the folks at Metrolinx. And the government, MTO and IO, all those folks, you should probably do a little in-house talking to those folks, because when the engineers don't have access to Metrolinx, we all have a problem. When you have a CEO whose salary went from $200,000 to $1 million a year, and he's not delivering, and I don't know who he's friends with, and I don't know, whatever, like all that stuff. I don't know what measurables and what deliverables you are using to keep him. So I know that the NDP today called, in the wake of that announcement, have called for the government to get rid of him. So, look at why you would keep him. If you're not willing to listen to us and you're not willing to fire Mr. Verster, figure out why on earth you would keep him and hold him to some kind of account. Oh, no, that is so how I really feel. The member from Kitchener-Conestoga That's how I feel. When I'm dealing with folks in the construction industry and the engineering world who can't, it's one of the worst agencies for them to deal with. That's a problem for this province. So, transportation for the future, let's do things in the right way, and I will leave it there and take questions. Thank you.
It's now time for questions. I recognize the member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And one of the things that we're dealing with right now in Waterloo Region and specifically in the community of Breslau is something that you had touched on. And looking at ways to kind of shape thinking and create a new station in that area. And it's something that our community is really looking forward to. It's something that I've been working on for quite some time. Even the member of Waterloo, I know, has, and I'll give you some credit where credit's due. It's okay, you know, you bang the drum loudly, and we appreciate that. So it's something that's coming, but it's been slow, and there's been a lot of kind of talk as to why that is. But I think something that's been really important that we've done as a government is we've tried to bring kind of everybody together to have a little bit of skin in the game. And I think that is really kind of the way of the future and looking at how we're going to keep people accountable. So, you know, obviously we've got Metrolinx, and we've got the province, we've got the upper tier and lower tier municipality involved, and some of the developers in the region that are very keen on seeing this get done. So I'd just like to hear some more of your thoughts. Obviously Bowmanville, you know, we've got the GO train coming out there, and just kind of what you're hearing from your community and how you think that's playing out.
Back to the member from Oshawa for a response.
Thank you, and I hope that we actually have more of a chance for back and forth because I have lots of thoughts on what you just said. And I do recall, actually, we had both been sitting at estimates and had this conversation about Breslau, about Oshawa, and you know, the areas along the Bowmanville GO Extension, because every community sees its growth and sees its need and wants to ensure that they have strong public transit, that they can actually count on it being built, and not just the rail, but also the stations. So a little bit of skin in the game, I take your point, but at the same time, when you have Bill 23 that withdrew a lot of the skin in the game, but withdrew revenue from municipalities, I know this isn't downloading per se, but it feels like it. It is giving them another thing that they have to pay for, should they so choose. But if they don't choose to, what happens? Can Breslau afford to build this station? What does it look like if they can't?
Question? I recognize the member for London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I want to thank the member for Oshawa for her comments. And she started out by saying that it's not just that the government does something, but that they do it well. And we have seen a lot of examples from this government where things have not gone well. And I wanted to share the experience of London with the GO Transit pilot that was announced 2 years ago by Metrolinx. There was going to be a GO train connecting London to Toronto. Now, unfortunately, that train left London in the wee hours of the morning. It spent 4 hours on a meandering route to get to Toronto. And after 2 years, guess what, Speaker? The Metrolinx determined that the pilot showed that it wasn't viable to have this service because people weren't taking that 4-hour option to Toronto.
Question?
So I want to ask the member, is there anything in this bill that would address the transportation needs of communities like London and southwestern Ontario?
Back to the member from Oshawa.
That's a good question, and frankly, I'm not entirely sure, because this second schedule of the bill that lays out basically a fairly drastic policy shift for the government about who pays for provincial public transportation infrastructure is going to change things for municipalities. So will they factor that into their plan and save up all of their ducats for one day they could build a station too? I don't know. I think a lot of places that are looking to the government both for leadership but also for that commitment to help them as they are growing communities within growing and changing infrastructure needs, this would be a sign to them that the government doesn't seem to be in the game of building public transportation anymore. And I would love clarity because I'm not just trying to scare people, but it does seem like a pretty significant policy shift. So I don't know what this says to London.
Further questions? I recognize the member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oopsies. Sorry. The province will be posting legislation to the regulatory registry for public comment. Also, if the station contribution fee is approved, the Ministry of Infrastructure will conduct broader engagement with the development community to inform the design of regulations and implementation. This being the case, my question to the member from Oshawa, would you not agree that these are great transparent moves to ensure that this tool is used effectively?
Back to the member for response.
I don't know, because I don't know what effective use of this tool is going to look like, and I don't know that municipalities do either. It's too soon to tell. It's been a couple days. I know that the government has been connecting with, like, Durham Region, for example. I'm sure some of the others. But for those who have not been in those conversations, I think they're probably fairly they're going to look at this with interest and wonder what it will mean for them. So I don't know. But when the government is suggesting that, don't worry, there's going to be a consultation period, that means nothing to me, because your consultation periods are often you take information in and then that's the end of it. So if it doesn't shape what you do, and when I hear from engineers that they weigh in and that they give opinions, and then the government goes ahead with things anyway and says, thanks for your comments, we're doing it anyway, I don't have faith at all. Prove me wrong, though, please.
Further questions? I recognize the member for Ottawa Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. To my friend from Oshawa, thank you for those remarks. I wanted to follow up on something, given the skepticism you expressed and others have expressed about Metrolinx's capacity to build transit. It would seem this bill itself, as I mentioned earlier in debate, is a vote of non-confidence in Metrolinx if we're asking municipalities to take on this risk and burden. I also note from the Auditor General's 2020 report in the Eglinton Crosstown, my friend, that Metrolinx was continuing to work with an agency, Crosslinx, despite the fact that Crosslinx had over 380 rejected designs. They were continuing to build in a capacity called building at risk, which meant they were building with designs that had not been properly approved by people required to scrutinize them. So, friend from Oshawa, what the heck is going on at Metrolinx?
Back to the friend from Oshawa.
Well, perhaps we could ask one of the 59 vice presidents or the 19 C-suite executives. We can't ask any of the engineers because there are zero. There are none of them on staff that they consult with them, or so I've been told. When you take it to the other side and you talk, though, to the engineering firms and groups out there, they're very worried about things in the province. And they have an obligation, safety obligation, but it would seem that they are sort of shouting into an abyss, and I don't know how it's being received on the government side, how Metrolinx is taking it or not. Metrolinx, reputationally speaking, unfortunately, has taken a bit of a hit since Mr. Verster joined them, and maybe it's not just him, but I think that they've got some proving to do to make sure that they can indeed be trusted to build. But when the government doesn't fund them either, when the government doesn't give them money for stations and says, figure out a plan to bring money in, but we're not going to pay for stations, we're in a mess that the government can't just wash its hands of.
Next final question. I recognize the member for Waterloo.
Thank you very much, and I really do appreciate the comments by the member from Oshawa. I mean, we're really at a tipping point here with Metrolinx. They've abandoned their original mandate. They are essentially leaderless. Phil Verster once told me in a briefing that Catherine trains run on tracks. I mean, that's the level that we're working with here. What do you think is moving forward for Metrolinx?
Back to the member for final response.
Sorry, you took me down an interesting rabbit hole in my mind here, because I remember being at an infrastructure dinner with the former Minister of Infrastructure, gave a speech, and I went over to talk to Mr. Verser, and he literally ran away from me. So, anyway, whatever. Yeah, your question, I don't remember it, but are we at a tipping point? Where do we go from here? Something like that? I don't know. I would have thought that with a bill called Transportation for the Future Act, I mean, it's fine that there are these two pieces that we're debating. I look forward, though, to both this Minister of Infrastructure and the new Minister of Transportation hopefully working with not just Metrolinx, but with other agencies and partners to re-up some of the confidence and actually build the transportation infrastructure that is needed in this province. Thank you.